Hello, I'm April Jones, and we at Jones Law Firm care about you, your family, and your well-being. That's why we've put together this informative webinar series to answer your questions about life, about the law, about your family. So thank you for joining us, and let's get started. We can go ahead and get started. I want to introduce myself and my team. I'm April Jones. I've been an attorney 30 years. I founded Jones Law Firm PC in Colorado in 2000. So we've been serving Colorado for over 20 years. I am joined today with our senior attorneys. We have Patrick Bachman. And Patrick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And then Nikki, I'll have you introduce yourself, and then we'll get right on our topic today, which is prenups, postnups. Do you need them? Do you not? Okay.
I'm Patrick Bartman. I've been practicing law for 23 years now. I'm licensed in Colorado, Texas, and the Cherokee Nation.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I'm Nikki Van Getz. I went to University of Denver, have been in Colorado for 14 years, and exclusively practice family law.
Okay, well then let us get after it today. So, prenups, what are they? So they are premarital agreements. Prior to getting married, you reach an agreement with your intended, and you take the right steps, do the right things with the expectation that it will hold up in court in large part often. Does that sound about how firm those are? And there's things you have to do to make sure that they can withhold objection in court. So a lot there. And then postnuptials are agreements that you reach after you're already married, where you say, okay, and this applies to both of them. If we just go real general here for a few minutes, if you were to get divorced, the court has ways and rules about how to divide your assets. So Colorado is an equity state. Equity looks like community property, which tends to look like half. So all assets acquired during marriage are presumed to be marital, unless it's inheritance or gift. So you have those rules that just come with filing for divorce in Colorado. If you don't want those rules to apply to you, if you don't want all of your assets that you acquired during your marriage to be marital property, you can write an agreement around that. And that would be what you would put in your premarital agreement. But Colorado also allows you to write an agreement around that in a post-dissolution, post-marriage, prior to dissolution type way. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions here. One thing that I think is important before we take the questions is that people know what some of the things are that can't really be changed with a prenup. Specifically, alimony. The court will do what it wants. It will look at your case and make decisions at the time the matter is brought to the court. Nikki, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple areas where you cannot contract away from what the expectation is that the court would provide for. And alimony is one of those things. So, I mean, there's also child support's another one of those things. So you cannot waive the right to child support in a prenuptial agreement or a postmarital agreement. You also can't talk about what exactly you're going to do in terms of the division of child custody. You can't address that. And so there's certain things that you cannot contract away, but for the most part, there is a lot of leeway in terms of what you can include in a premarital or a postmarital agreement that will allow you to deviate from what that norm would be, that a court would put into place kind of in the absence of such an agreement.
Anything you want to add, Patrick, about what can and can't be contracted?
No, I think that's a good summary. I mean, basically, with a prenuptial or a postnuptial agreement, you're dividing up stuff, property, accounts, things like that. But Nikki's absolutely right. The court always has to rule in the best interest of the children. So you can't enter into a contract, at least in Colorado, about who's going to have primary custody, what parenting time you're going to get, what child support you would pay, and things like that.
All right, I have some questions here. This person has an existing prenup, and the prenup does talk about what the alimony payments will be in the event of a divorce. They said that it is after so many years of marriage, you get X amount. After so many more years, you get X more amount. Anyone want to comment on that? I will. So you can have that language in there, and you can set your
Sorry
expectations.
to interrupt, but you have an appointment.
You can set your expectation about what you want it to be, but recognize that at the time of dissolution, the court is going to make its own determination. Is it possible that the court could look at the decisions that you've made, the assets you've acquired, what your reasonable needs are, and determine whether you're being taken advantage of, and then make an order on alimony? Absolutely. But it is within the court's discretion to make that determination. And truthfully, it's in the court's discretion, period, within the realm of the criteria for alimony. So the fact that you have that in there, I'm fine with, because that is what your intentions are. It's just, if you were to create that prenup and you think this is what is going to happen, and you're betting the farm on it or anything else, that's where we would advise you. We don't know what the court's going to do when this is presented to them, because there's so many factors. Is the court going to look at this when you're 79 years old? And what are your needs? And you're living on Social Security, and then you'll have close to nothing? Or is the court going to look at it when you are, you've divided an asset that is worth a lot of money, and you don't really need more alimony? So if you want to get more alimony and you don't need it, and somebody wants to pay it to you, the court could say fine. So it's a lot that is determined as of the time of filing, and whoever that judge is on that, at that time, and whatever your circumstances are at that time. So just don't think that this is exactly the way it's going to go down, and you'll be fine.
Right, and it's important not to confuse a prenuptial agreement that may mention spousal maintenance or alimony with something like that we call contractual alimony, which is something that you might do in the course of the divorce, where the two parties contract to do alimony for maybe a different amount than the court would order it, or for a different length of time and under different circumstances. But that's something happens during a divorce. It can't be done and be forced to stick in a prenuptial or a postnuptial agreement, like April said.
And that's exactly right, Patrick. Just to expand a little more for the questions about contractual alimony. Contractual alimony is where the two parties agree that this is what they're going to pay, like what Patrick is saying, and this is the amount, and it's for a specific amount of time, a specific amount, just like a contract, and then it ends. It doesn't matter if you sign that you're going to pay $1 million a month, and then you lose your ability to earn, or you get hit by a bus and you don't have any more money. It does not matter. You contracted to do it, and that is your court order, and it's non-modifiable. If the person that you're promising to pay $1 million then goes and now they're worth $20 million and don't need your money, still doesn't matter, because you contracted for a specific amount for a specific amount of time. It is literally a non-modifiable contract if it's written correctly. And you might ask, why would somebody sign up for contractual maintenance? Nikki, why would somebody sign up for contractual maintenance?
It would be a great idea in circumstances under which you would be the person obligated to be paying spousal support or alimony, and you expect that you have a greater earning potential in the future. Your business is going to be doing exceptionally better in the future, or something like that, to where you don't want to have to relitigate the issue or leave the door open to modification. You want to say, you know what, let's just manage expectations fully moving forward. we don't need to fight about this in the future. If you lose your job, if I lose my job, let's just manage expectations right from the get-go and know exactly what that amount is going to be and what that term is going to be. So then you don't end up in court fighting about it later. So there can be benefits to having contractual spousal support put into place.
Anything you want to add to that, Patrick?
No, I think that's excellent. I noticed a question popped up. Would you recommend everyone get a prenup? And my response would be, ask Jeff Bezos if everyone should get a prenup, right? When you,
you know what, I think we might have 3 different answers. So on the count of 3, we're gonna say what our answer is. Ready? Should everyone get a prenup? 1, 2, 3. No.
it depends.
So you got 2 no's and it depends. I mean, when you say everyone, I mean, now you're making it way broad, right? We all,
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say we all wish we were Jeff Bezos because that's probably not true, but he's got problems that aren't every man's problems. But there you go. Are you in your what's the nature of your relationship? What's the nature of your expectation of each other? Do you believe that one of you has a greater earning power that you want to protect? Do you believe that no matter what, you want to protect each other? And that's how you're starting out in your marriage. It depends on where you're coming from. And that's something we can talk to you about. Like, what is your goal? And what are your fears? So much of what we do, and let me know if you guys agree, so much of what we do is based on what people fear. If you fear you're going to lose everything and that the person's only marrying you because they want your money and the person doesn't care about your money, does that help you not have that fear? Or do you think that this person wants to leave me with nothing? They want to use up my youth and leave me with nothing. And that's your fear. So then maybe that person doesn't want a prenup. Like it's very situational. And what we really focus on at Jones Law Firm is being thoughtful and strategic and basing what we decide on your specific facts. Patrick, it looks like you wanted to say something, and then Nikki.
No, I was just going to say, I'm probably more pro prenup than a lot of people for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, it's kind of like buying renter's insurance when you rent an apartment. Probably you won't ever have to use it, but if the apartment catches fire or if the toilet in the apartment above you overflows, you're going to wish you had it. The other benefit, I think, to a prenup, even if you're both starting out with nothing, even if you don't have any assets, even if neither one of you anticipates coming into a big inheritance or striking it rich or becoming Jeff Bezos, it establishes a pattern that at the beginning of the marriage, you're able to talk to your spouse realistically about important issues like finances. And I would especially urge this for people who, like me, are on a second marriage, because there are more people involved than just the 2 of you. If you have kids from a first marriage, things like that. So I think it's something that everyone should at least think about, and maybe get some advice from us about whether or not it would be in your best interest. But again, it's an opportunity for spouses or people who are about to be spouses, fiancés, to have kind of a realistic talk about things that you don't necessarily want to talk about when you're in the warm glow of, oh, we're planning our wedding and all of that, because a little preparation in advance can potentially head off a lot of heartache and upset in the future.
Nikki, you said no. What are your thoughts? And thank you, Patrick. I mean, that's very important. It's very situational. Nikki.
Yeah, I would agree that it is situational. And, I think a lot of times when people are in a position where you don't have any funds, your future spouse doesn't have any funds, there's no assets and there's no expectation of assets, then maybe you're in a position where you're like, well, we're both going to be hardworking. We're both going to try to build and develop our lives together. That sort of thing. Maybe it's not something that would be appropriate for you, but I think in any sort of situation where there are pre-existing assets that may exist or an expectation of an inheritance or any sort of growth, that, it is wise to definitely consider having a prenuptial agreement in place, just because the way that we view things, this obviously isn't the only thing that we do is dealing with prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. A lot of it is dealing with divorces and legal separations in circumstances where people don't have that. And it is much more expensive, much more, it just takes a lot more time. And it's a way bigger headache to deal with those situations in the absence of those existing agreements. So it can save you a lot of time, heartache, headache, money in the long run by having that kind of insurance policy that Patrick was talking about. And you want to make sure that it's drafted in the right way, because we have seen circumstances under which it's not done appropriately and it might as well not even exist. So even though that intention was there, it's something that just you might as well just put in the trash.
That's a very good point.
Well, and that brings up another important point is one of the requirements for prenuptial or postnuptial agreements is full financial disclosure. In other words, both spouses have to swear out, this is all I own, these are my earnings, these are my assets, these are my accounts, and so forth. And they have to disclose that to both parties during the negotiations when you're setting up a prenup or a postnuptial agreement. And that brings up an important point that we have all seen in our practice is people in the middle of the divorce finding out, I had no idea that my spouse had all of these accounts. I didn't know that my spouse owned a diamond mine in South Africa. I didn't know about all this stuff. I was kept in the dark. I didn't know he owned all this money to the IRS, that sort of thing. If you have a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, you're swearing under oath, these are all of my assets and these are all of my debts. If a divorce comes up and it turns out you hid something, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble with the court. So it's an extra layer of security when you're doing one of these agreements that the other side or both sides really are swearing under oath, this is all I have, these are all my assets, these are all of my debts. And it's maybe a little bit more a security, something you don't have to worry about later on. If, God forbid, none of us planned to get divorced when we got married. I didn't plan to get divorced when I got married the first time, but it happens, and it happens to a lot of people. And you should do everything you can to protect yourself if something like that happens.
And I, believe it or not, I am such a romantic. Like, how can you be a romantic and you've had a divorce law firm for over 20 years? But that's probably exactly how, like, people, I mean, sometimes people, if you have that much distrust, then should you be getting married? So it just takes us back to that standard lawyer answer of it depends. And so much of marriage is all this incredible give and take, right? Even if one person is the breadwinner and the other person's just doing the traditional thing of taking care of kids and cleaning, houses and cleaning the house and I don't know what you training the dog. Like, there's just so much that makes a machine go that you can really harm it in some ways if you don't have the trust that because then you have the person doing all this stuff thinking they're not going to be cared for. So they still they need to be crafted in a way that doesn't kind of tank your relationship before you even get a chance to get started. And sometimes we see where people will protect what they have initially, but then allow the growth and the rules to apply to what they put together. So I do see successful prenups. I'm not saying that I don't, but I don't see people, we're not wedding planners, right? So we're missing all the other folks who didn't have prenups who still go on to live their lives well. So I believe those people exist too. And so that's something to consider. Now, one thing I have noticed over the years is if people will come in with a prenup, and they'll find it and it's yellow and the edges are, and if they've done well on top of it, then the prenup's almost irrelevant. It's like, oh yeah, you get this little thing that we thought was going to be huge when we've grown this huge estate. So it just all depends. And the other thing too, you can bet wrong, because if you say what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, and then the other person is the one who goes out and is extremely successful, and you're not, then you've cut yourself out the other way. So it requires some analysis and thought, but it's really necessary in a lot of cases. I'm not saying that it's not. Like, a lot of people come to the table with assets and things that they've earned or that they've had in their family for a long time or that they've gotten from their family. And what do you see in cases where people have assets and things they've gotten from their parents, and now it's all joint and they get divorced without a prenup? Any stories there?
Yeah,
Patrick?
that's an excellent point. In general, things that you inherit are considered your property. However, the increase from the inheritance is part of the marital estate. So, for example, in Texas, we would say the cow is separate property. The calves are community property, because Texas is a community
I've
property
never
state.
heard that. I like that. That's a good
Yeah,
way to say it.
it actually lists that in the family code about livestock, because Texas, right? So yeah, if when you're getting married, that you may be coming into inheritance, that's something to consider. You take, for an example, your auntie says that she's going to leave you her house, and it's not that big a house, and you don't think that much of it. But then 20 years later, the house is located right in prime real estate, let's say Capitol Hill in Denver, and your auntie passes away, and you've inherited this house, and the value of it has increased dramatically during the marriage. That's an issue that you might want to think about. One of the questioners just asked, when do you know if you need a postnup? And that kind of ties into that. If either one of the spouses has a major change in financial circumstances, that's when you might think about getting into a postnup. Though it's important to realize you can't do a postnup in what's called in contemplation of divorce. In other words, right before somebody's fixing to run out the door, you can't suddenly get the other side to sign off on a postnup agreement.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to know, because people could say, oh, we're getting divorced, let me have you sign off on how everything is now mine, and the court doesn't uphold those. It's the same thing as in the beginning of before you're married, and I give this example, which is not nearly as good as your calf example, to make that point. But here's an example to make the point of why you have to have full disclosures with the prenups. Is you've had the cases in the past where you get the baseball player and the helicopter and the beautiful new wife to be signing, a prenup as they're landing into their wedding. That's what the court doesn't uphold, because there was not disclosure, there was pressure, there was not the proof that you did this with a clear head and in a well-reasoned way that meant you intended to give up everything. It's the same type of concept in a postnup, that you intended to make this decision, but you weren't planning on doing it because you're about to be divorced and left with nothing. So the court does try to put in protections for people, because the potential for abuse and misuse of pre and postnups is, as you can imagine, probably is pretty significant. So there are rules to follow in order to ensure that the prenups and the postnups have some validity. And to expand a little more on the postnup, when I see that, it might be a couple that has developed some type of mistrust for whatever reason. Let's say one person has a drug habit. I'll just exaggerate the facts. A drug habit, spending tons of money. They still love each other and want to work it out in some way. But now the non-drug addict spouse who's earning money has this fear of losing everything because of the drug addict spouse or the gambler spouse. We see it in all different ways, but the same facts at the end of the day. And a post-nuptial that protects their money, protects the things that she's worried about, can allow that couple to then continue to cohabitate forever even, because now the finances are safe while the other person tries to make better choices going forward, or not. Anything you want to add, Nikki?
No, I was just kind of supplement what Patrick had said, because I have seen that even just in the last year, where We've had a client who did come into a pretty sizable inheritance. He got a house from the inheritance, and the appreciation in the value of that home, that is considered marital property, even though the house itself, the value of it when he received it separate, the appreciation was pretty substantial given, kind of the real estate market in Colorado right now, to where that was a thing that he did not foresee having been considered marital property and being subject to potential division. We were able to ultimately protect that from him, but it was a lot more of a battle than it would have been had there been a prenuptial or a postnuptial agreement that would have protected that for him.
I had a similar case.
I'm sorry.
It was an oil and gas case, and it was inherited money, and they had been living off of the oil and gas payments, and the well was, going down, was depleting over time. The opposing party didn't even think that there was any increased value because they've been depleting the asset. Well, along comes fracking and the ability to get down into the deeper layers to access all this other oil, which we hired an expert to do that. And the expert talked about just how much oil there was under there and what the value now was. And so all of that without a prenup and without anything keeping it separate became marital. And it was very painful for that family on the other side to see how the oil money was to be shared. So it's always something. Patrick.
Yeah, and I think April made an excellent point about why you might need a postnuptial agreement. What if something bad happens? What if one of the spouses is cheating, has a drug habit, a gambling habit? You can kind of think in that sense, maybe the postnup is a way to save your marriage. Because if you're really concerned and you think, I really want to stay with this person, but I can't, they've got a problem and they need to deal with it and I need to be protected. Then if you have the security of a postnup, then you can put that worry behind you and work on your marriage, go through counseling, things like that, and put your marriage saving your marriage first without having to worry that if you do end up having to go through a divorce, you're going to be wiped out, or it's going to really hurt you financially, or the other spouse is going to squander stuff on gambling or girlfriends or boyfriends or what have you. So postnup doesn't necessarily have to mean I'm worried that I'm going to get divorced. It could also mean I want to save my marriage and I need some tools. I need some way to protect myself so I can concentrate on working out our relationship.
Right. Good point, Patrick. And the same thing in prenups, because you have somebody, I'll get a guy, he's marrying a girl from a really wealthy family and he just loves her. Well, the family's like, do you love her or do you love, the 25 McDonald's
Right.
that we own? And that the prenup actually gives that couple the peace of mind to say, hey, I love her and it's fine. I don't want to have a claim on the increase from all the family businesses. So again, it's very situational, what kind of decisions you make and why. And you can see it when we're writing them up. There's a question of what should I have prepared for an attorney when talking to them about a prenup? You should be, I like to really hear what people's wish lists are. Like, what is it that you are really trying to accomplish? Tell me what you're fearful of, what you're desiring to do, like what's the real deal? And then once you share that, then we can craft something that creates that. So that's a big one for me. The obvious one is to, know your assets and so forth. What do you want to add, Patrick?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. What if you contact us and you're saying, hey, I'm thinking about a prenup, what I would probably do is send you the documentation of what goes into a sworn financial statement. Just say, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a formal response to it, but that's the kind of stuff you're going to need. If you bring that with you to the meeting when we meet, we can go over it and I can say, well, here are some assets, here are how things might work out in the course of how they would be dividing up your marital estate and so forth. So all of the as much information as you can about your assets and divorce assets and debts, assets and debts, and then as much information you have as of your fiance's assets and debts, which brings up another point. It's often a good idea on a prenup or a postnup that each party have their own attorney. Is that more expensive? Yes. Yeah, exactly. You have to have it, and you might think, man, I don't want us both to have to hire a lawyer. But number one, you have to do it. But number two, it's a way to, the reason it's required is to protect the parties. You don't want a situation where somebody feels like they're being arm twisted or gaslit into signing away their legal rights. And I've had clients in the past say, in other contexts where we both used the same lawyer. No, you didn't. One of you had a lawyer and the other one didn't. And that's why you're required to have different lawyers in this, so that you each have your own legal brain looking at.
It's even suggested, and we do this as best practice, that the party with the assets to protect, when there is that kind of a disparity, just pays for a lawyer, just a third party, unrelated, obviously, lawyer for the other side to make sure they have someone to review that document for them. I get calls from colleagues all the time saying, would you be on the other side of this prenup? Because you want it to be able to withstand scrutiny, so the court knows that it was entered into freely, fairly, voluntarily. So we are at the end of our time. What you've seen today is how we operate at Jones Law Firm. Like, we have this real team approach where we all we meet daily, actually, and we go over cases and we staff them and we talk about what would you do? What have you seen other courts do? What have you seen the judge do? What do you know about this lawyer? So that we can really be thoughtful and strategic when we're making decisions about your case. So I think that's one of our favorite things about ourselves. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The team approach is, I think it's vital. You're not just getting tunnel vision on everything. You're getting the opportunity to brainstorm things and think strategically for every single client that we have.
Right. So in our standard, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and our lawyers come from a lot of different backgrounds and have different experiences, and that helps because we have an extra set of eyes, an extra set of brains to look at your situation. So if you think you might need a prenup, and if you think you're already married, you think you might need a postnup, call us. We'll sit down and talk with you, and we'll figure out what's going to help you. What can we do for you to help your situation and give you the kind of peace of mind you need?
That's exactly right. I couldn't have said it better. We're DenverDivorceAttorneys.com. That's Denver Divorce Attorneys with an S. DenverDivorceAttorneys.com. Call us. Let's talk about it. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for these guys are the best. They're a premier Colorado family law attorneys. So if you get to talk to them, you're doing great. Okay. So thank you. Call us if you need us. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. If you or someone you know would benefit from watching a recording of this webinar or any of our other webinars, they can be found at DenverDivorceAttorneys.com. Thank you, and keep a lookout for future live webinars, and I hope to see you again.